Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to a better life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me today is our very special guest, and I can call him my dear friend, Leo Vieira. Leonardo Vieira is one of the founders and workers for the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, SNSB. He has conducted and helped many different types of work there, including study groups, mediumship meetings, as well as public lectures, public talks. Like me, Leo Vieira has a similar formal education in business administration, and we often laugh at how, when we both discuss topics from a spiritual perspective, we gravitate toward this common business language, right, Leo? What are the parallels that we find? The fact that what we teach can gather when they are seen from different perspectives, right? When those perspectives collide, if you will. But I want to say, before we get started, Leo, I want to say to everyone who is here with us today, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And today's episode of Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, is brought to you by our friends at the Spirit Society of Baltimore. And it is also sponsored by AME Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association, the United States Spiritist Federation, TV Mansão do Caminho, which is the TV or the video publishing arm of that Brazilian philanthropic organization, and the International Spiritist Council. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't done so. And if you'd like to check out other channels about this program, please do so at spiritist.us. But I got to go back to you, Leo. It is so good to be here with you today and discuss this world of for profit corporative environment and how this is the question for this conversation today. How can we bring a spiritual and psychological discussion about that context that you and I live, right? But if you're interested in knowing more about the subject, we highly recommend you the following books I'm going to bring to the screen now. Happy Life, Wake Up and Be Happy, The Conscious Being. They're all written by Joanna de Angelis with collaboration with Divaldo Franco, and they're all part of the psychological. I'm sorry, I'm saying something wrong. Two of the three are part of the psychological series. Happy Life, it's a little tiny book that I have actually in front of me, tiny because it's maybe 5 by 7 in its publication, and the messages are quite small. But wanted to say that, as I alluded before, I've had the pleasure to work with Leo just a few months ago, and we were together discussing two books that were recently published in English by our author, spiritual author, Joanna de Angelis. And there were Empty Lives and A Full Life. And it was good to have then and now these opportunities, right, Leo, to come together and to break down, because that's what we're doing, break down those topics found in those works by Joanna de Angelis. And I'd say, Leo, it is really interesting that we're here talking about something that is so important to both of us. And I wanted to, if you don't mind, to start our discussion by sharing what Joanna, and it's a very, wow, quite stern view of Joanna de Angelis when she discusses or what she refers to a soulless business. In fact, if you look into, and I have it in front of me, but Happy Life, page or message 158, she makes a very interesting analogy. And I say that because of what we're going through right now in this post pandemic era. So, Leo, I'd like to, before I give the mic to you, to read that message. Is that okay?
Fine with
So,
me.
all right. So she starts like this: shady business deals result in poisonous profits. Many people justify them and praise the profit they get from them. They say they're a sign of the times and everyone should take advantage of an opportunity. Since morals are out of control, do not let yourself be misled by them. Rather, control the abuses and excesses that come your way in order to correct this chaotic situation. Error should never be taken as an example. Lovely. So she ends her message by saying, during a epidemic, flu does not become the standard of health just because most people are infected with it. So vaccinate yourself against abuses and you will have your life in order. Maybe without the extras, but never with scarcity or lack. How about that, Leo? I just think that is brilliant, and we a bit of a taboo, right? If you think in terms of very specific language about poisonous profit environment that you and I both work at. But what I'm thinking about is right now we're in the what many consider post-pandemic world. Our work environments really lack that perhaps what is now being very clearly identified as the work-life balance, right? And because of it, this discussion, in my opinion, becomes quite urgent because it taps into an environment that may lead to mental health and well-being issues. But with that, can we talk a little bit about what is this environment and how can you and I, Leo, and everybody else here bring a soul to what is that soulless enterprise?
Very well, Marcia. Thank you so much for this warm welcoming, this opening part of it, this segment that we're working together on it. This message, it couldn't really start us any better, right? The the to lay out what we were trying to convey here, the message. It's an environment you and I we created, right? When I say you and I, it's all of us. We create day in and day out this environment for ourselves. And one may ask, what are you talking about? Now, I didn't do this. I did not do that. Well, stick with us to the end. Perhaps you understand a little bit better. It's nice that you bring this message from Happy Life because it connects straight to the chapter that we would like to share with the public, with our viewers, that is found on the book Liberation Through Love by Joanna de Angelis, chapter 12. It's the title of the message is also of the chapter is very interesting because it really would translate into businesses, right? But we would
Uh-huh.
like to call it organizations, right? Let us try to dive into this idea of organization. And Joanna de Angelis, also very stern, also very direct to the point, brings this idea of these business dealings that we're living nowadays, right? What these organizations represent on planet Earth nowadays, and what we need to do perhaps in order for us to change. So there's quite a bit for us to cover. We'll go ahead and kind of also bring some ideals that we learn through Spiritism, right? In the idea of a philosophical change that also
Mhm.
embraces a religious aspect within ourselves to to bring this concept in the organization field in the areas, right? Many of the work area, many of us find very many conflicts in terms of what we see in our workday environment, in the companies that we deal with, it, the companies that we purchase products from, right? We hear all the scandals, the difficulties that we come across, and sometimes we feel powerless. Sometimes we feel, or most of the time, we feel that there is no way to change this. And here's the idea, and we're going to talk more about it, but before we need to create a, let's call it a foundation. But the idea here is for us to spiritualize this environment. But we're going to talk more about this. Joanna de Angelis starts really interesting with an interesting concept, or let's say passage, when she's talking about this. And I'll quote real quick here for us, so that we can get the idea why I mentioned that we are creating this environment. She says the following: in the modern world filled with the technology and the extravagances, the concept of simplicity and abnegation become tenaciously fought in order to give way to automation, eccentricity, and the interest of immediate profit. Right. So what are we lacking here? What are we doing to our lives? We enter this idea that I want, we have to have this, we have to have that, and we transpose that onto others, right? We create necessities that perhaps these organizations they're trying to provide, right? However, those who work in these organizations, I mean us, right? We have to work tirelessly, to provide these necessities, right? The more we ask, the more, if there is a demand, there will be also a market created behind it, right? And until now, yes, Leo, we're not solving the issues. What do we need to do? We need to, enter this environment with a different mind, with a different heart as well, because one has to balance it out with one another, right? We see that these institutions, these organizations, they did not pop out of nowhere, right? They came about because of our needs, right? We enter these works. When we go to work, we're going to work to do what? We're going to transfer our services, right? Our labor for a salary, right? And that's exactly what the organization is doing. Can Leo provide this? Can Marcia provide this? Can
Hmm.
anybody else do this work or not? So we are then entering this idea and we
Hmm.
create this exchange, right? So if Leo, for example, is wants to make more money, what is he going to do? He's going to find a higher position within the organization that he's going to kill himself, right?
Hmm.
Until Leo gets to an old age and say, wait a minute, what was this for? Right? So again, I'm going back to the self, to me, to show that perhaps I'm the one creating this necessity. I'm creating the monster that in fact will bite me in the behind, if we can say that with all due respect of the
Hmm.
analogy here, that it's like, okay, wait a minute, I created this monster, right? But
And
we tend to.
let me just stop you there because I think it's important before I think we're really in a good path to talk about the creation of the quote unquote monster, which is a cycle of not need, but a illusion of a need that leads you to have to produce, right? We're society of production,
Mhm.
I also can say we are society of I have versus a society of I am. Therefore, if my identity is based on what I have, and Leo, I think the I have may be also related to I have power, I have beauty, I have influence, I have political clout, whatever that may be, is still the I have, right? And the illusion of a need then becomes this cycle of the more you need, the more you work, the more you have, the more you need, the more you work, which is really a terrible thing to fall prey to. And I think if I were to speak as if Joanna was here talking to the two of us, it would be a terrible thing to waste our existence in this quote unquote rat race. But go ahead. I'm
You
sorry
know, very
for
much so.
yeah.
No, it's good that you bring this as well. It is in this cycle that we find ourselves working harder and harder and
Mhm,
harder, and we're
mhm,
still banishing or criticizing the organizations, but we forget, as Joanna de Angelis says, that we are the pieces of this gear, right? That is called the
mhm,
organization, right?
mhm,
And the organization itself does not have, as she's saying, is devoid of feelings of love, mercy, and compassion, because we, the components of this gear, is devoid of love, mercy, and compassion. I bring this to say one thing. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not. I never worked directly with in any HR position. My background, as you mentioned, Marcia, is in business administration. I have a degree also in management, where I look at these concepts. As much as we study, as much as we work on it, we forget to exercise it. We forget to put
Mhm.
ourselves and take a step back and say, wait a minute, I'm creating this difficulty. I'm creating this difficult in the environment where I work, right? Where I am analyzing the product that the company or the service
Mhm.
that the company provides, right? But I forget, what is my part on all this thing? What is my product? And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, right? So the idea here is for us to take the psychological teachings that we have received many many times,
Mhm.
and apply at work, right? Make it available to all of us. We see some change. One of the things that Joanna de Angelis also mentions in this chapter is that we see companies that they are thriving in applying themselves resources as well in investing, their profits in education, hygiene, health programs, and everything. But behind, there's still some level of, let's say, working to death, creating slaves, right, in some of these areas. But it's important that you said that is the want, is the need that I'm presenting to the universe. Let's bring it down a little bit to planet Earth, to the
Mhm.
environment where I live, that
Mhm.
are creating these monsters, right?
And I love what you said when Joanna speaks. Okay, okay, don't bite me. Yeah, I can just jokingly hear, right? I did say that there are companies that will reinvest in this is really social sustainability, right, Leo? And there are some, not all companies are bad. There are some that reinvest the profits in foundations. And I'm not going to say names, but I can rattle just in my mind several that I know. X and X Foundation, X and X Foundation, they did do good. But I can tell you that if we go back from a biblical perspective, what Jesus used to say, right? Jesus never, ever judged the poor, the meek, the falling, the sinner, but he judged those sternly that judged them, right? On a different note, and that's the correlation that I would like to bring here, is that Jesus um, was very harsh when he talked about the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. As you know, Pharisees were those that were in charge of the oral, in addition to written laws of Mosaic laws in at the time of Jesus, and they preached and they did a lot of their work in terms of purification, etc., etc. But why was Jesus so upset? Because he saw that as just superficial, is a very hypocritical way of doing good. So I hear from Joanna's words a little bit of that caution here. This is an alert. Do not see the goodness that some companies are doing at face value, because they may be doing that for, I don't know, a marketing campaign, tax deduction, so on and so forth. So, but regardless of that, what you were saying, Leo, really brings to mind we are not soulless. And as part of a cog in the wheel, right, we can and should influence how that wheel goes round and around, right?
Very well. And I am glad that you brought this passage. The representation of what we're living nowadays is exactly what we learn in terms of spirituality with Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there were many that utilized the external means, right, to show something that within themselves, and I like to say within ourselves, we're not yet, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
not that pure yet. So it happens, every day. I think in a way is a good thing that happens, that sometimes we strive to be something that we are not yet, or try to
Mm-hmm.
show something that we're not yet, because it teaches a lot, sometimes in a very difficult way. but it does, right? It happens. It's part of our nature, and I think as we understand our nature, we learn from it, and hopefully we grow. And in the future, we're a little bit more humble, hopefully.
Hmm.
But this idea is really interesting because it takes us to the point that we were saying earlier in terms of the spiritualization of the work environment, right?
Hmm.
Since you mentioned this idea of the wheel, yes, I'm part of that wheel. I'm part of that the whole system that I'm
Hmm.
in, and we chose the idea of organization because our home is an organization, right? Our
Yes.
Spirit Center is an organization. If we're part of a congregation, that congregation also has its bylaws, has its connection with the political, social environment of our lives, right? So I think it's important for us to bring this in broaden our perspective in this idea, because let us take let us we, each one of us, try to spiritualize that environment. How do we do this? This is the part that sometimes it's very difficult, right? Because it's like you're pulling the rope, by yourself sometimes, right? And you have 10 other people, 15 other people, depending on the size of your group, your work environment, pulling on the other side. But
Yes.
it will get to a point that they're gonna have to give in, and people want change. And we see these changes in the environment right now, right? Joanna de Angelis, I like to say, just again, bring another passage that Joanna de
Hmm.
Angelis brings to for us to again bring as a foundation of this part, right? That we're saying in terms of spiritualization. Joanna de Angelis says that with Jesus, organizations are composed of solidarity, benevolence, and peace. I want to just make a parenthesis here that we're
Hmm.
bringing Jesus here. It is this is a spiritual environment. This is we're trying to bring spirituality to one another. It's not solely based on the religious concept that we're
Hmm.
looking at Jesus, but as the teacher of someone, as you said, brought us a different perspective and say, let us change this. Let us not
Hmm.
be something that we're not. Let us question, right, with kindness, with
Hmm.
love in our hearts, right?
Hmm.
And if I may, I would like to bring some concepts of that Spiritism brings to us. Is that okay? Or you have?
Yeah, let me say something before you go there. Is that
Sure,
okay
sure.
as well?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
And my apologies. I just wanted, as you were talking, because uh, the main the discussion point here is how do we bring how do we become the champions of bringing spiritualization to our work environment? And well put, our homes are also organizations, our um, places of congregation, our, I don't know, your HOA, your right, your community center, all of those are locus, places of congregation. And as such, we can always take the idea that it's not me, right? I'm just a silent bystander, and we're not. We can indeed um, help. But what is interesting here is to remember, to remind ourselves, Leo, that you and I live in a material world, right? So let us also not forget that illusion that I talked about it before, right? That the illusion around this, I don't know, success, happiness, whatever it is that fuels our sense of I arrived, I met what I'm here to do, is really the most common cause for anxiety we go through. So if we think about it again, oh, I want to be happy, I want to be successful. And I look at those who look like they're happy, successful, or even highly applauded people, because they do make a very strong impression to us. And in this world of social media, where not only I am admired, but I make myself be seen through social media, right? Um, but they give that impression of perhaps the exuberance of youth, the allure of health and physical beauty, or even the attraction of their, their ability with their bodies. And regardless of how we intellectually understand, recognize that this is all very ephemeral, there is illusory to us, they do provoke, at a minimum, a sense of envy. Oh, why is so and so successful, so
Right.
this, so that, and I'm not? So for me, even when we don't do it expressly, intentionally, we recognize that those who are politically, socially, financially powerful, they are hailed, they are recognized, they are applauded, as I mentioned before.
Hmm.
And when we go back to the notion, back before you move on to the next topic, Leo, is that when we discuss that business, that organizational environment, and we know the machine itself is soulless, but it's comprised of soulful people, right? uh, it's important to see that those organizations that we make they're part of it. They also go through this ever changing horizon that, like us, I want to be more successful. The wheel again, right? I want to be more successful. There's that horizon that we almost met, but we got to do better next quarter or next year. So I think it is awesome if we bring to this discussion a little bit of the teachings of Spiritism that can frame and help us understand how can we spiritualize, and there's no such a word, that's my word, our work environments. Go ahead,
Right.
Leo.
Well, very well. It is to 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 make it practical for all of us, right?
Hmm.
There are two passages of this chapter that I would like to bring. The first one is the following: Watch the springs of the heart from which good and bad thoughts flow, and be careful. This is Joanna's words, right? Here's what we have to acknowledge: one thing that she acknowledges, right? That within us, as you said, we are soulful individuals, right? We have some good within us, right? So we have good thoughts, we have good feelings, especially towards ourselves, especially towards
Hmm.
the ones that are near us, right? That can
Hmm.
be at home, that can be at work. But we bad mouth other. We do different things. Bad thoughts, floods our environment sometimes. We're in an environment. Um, in what she's saying, that we have to be careful, not only with the negative thoughts, but the good thoughts as well. Because sometimes what I believe it's the good for me will be something detrimental for others, right? Because it's going
Hmm.
to cost others also to supply my needs, since we're talking about the, pay, give, or take, whatever it is, right? So this is something that it will be transformed as we spirits, right? We will
Hmm.
evolve. There's a really interesting passage of the Gospel according to Spiritism on chapter
Hmm.
3, entitled "There are many dwellings in my Father's house." Right? That
Hmm.
goes over the different categories of inhabited worlds, right? And we will
Hmm.
see that these inhabited worlds, they're different. They're different. Right now, planet Earth, we are in this level of the planets of trials and expiation. We're trialing, we're expiating certain things that perhaps happened in the past, because we are evolving spirits that have had many incarnations and will have many reincarnations after this one as well. So the explanation tells us that there are primitive planets, much like Earth has been through already, right? Of when we had long canines and whatnot. We were still discovering the idea of communication and whatnot, and then we transitioned over many years, thousands of years, into planets of trial and expiation. We're also now, interesting enough, in this process of going, or seeing the first dawns of regenerative planet, right? Which, not that we're going to be happier, or we're
Hmm.
going to be, or I shouldn't say happier, we will be happier, but it's going to be a perfect environment. But regeneration, right? That we're looking at things and taking a different approach, much like we're talking about today in terms of organization. And then happy planets and celestial planets. Why am I saying this? Because this transformation on planet Earth happens because we spirits are also evolving. It's not a determined moment or situation or that God imposes this transformation, even though we follow a law of transformation, right, in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this is a natural thing that has happened within us, and we can see, as we have talked already, that many organizations they're changing their environment to accommodate us, right?
Mm-hmm.
The parts of this beautiful gear. And then on the spirits book, we will see also the classification of the spirits, this transition that we make from the lower imperfect spirits to good spirit and then to pure spirits, right? This is actually part of part two of the spirits book. On chapter one, we can get some more information about that. Once more, why am I saying this? Because we're following this law of progress, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
undeniable that it's within us. We want to progress, whether intellectually, morally, spiritually, you name it. We're going through this. We feel this urge every single day. And then I'll come to complement this with Joanna de Angelis ideals here, right? From this passage. In Jesus' organizations by laws, she says that the greatest is always the one who serves best and not the one who exalts himself the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can I do in my environment? How can I make that wheel spin faster, more effectively, and more humane? I need to change. I
Yes.
need to be the one who is saying, wait a minute, yes, this is difficult, but I will do my part. And if I do my part, I will contagiate others in a good sense, that they will look at me and say, huh, if Leo can do it, I can do it as well. Much like sometimes we look at certain individuals and say, wait a minute, yeah, he accomplished this, right? But we need to change this concept, right? We need to change this idea that is a competition, right? Rather, to put ourselves in a position where I want to serve. I want to make it better. Yes, the company has a product, but what is my product, right? I some time ago I talked to a group of students at a university in Texas, and we're talking about CRM, right? Customer relationship management, right? And we are discussing this idea of the company's product, how we relate better with our customers and whatnot. But we forget more often than not that that person next to me in my work environment is also my customer. I like to call them internal customers, right?
Yes.
If I'm not doing well with that individual, if I'm not doing well with the president, the manager, guess what? My outside customers, they will feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we forget this. So, what is my product? What can I offer? If we were to ask this and do our part, we would live in a much better environment in our organizations and make it prosper, not only for the company, right? Make our lives prosper as well. Because one thing it will be for sure that when we go home, we will be able to answer a final question that we can pose ourselves at the end of the day. Have I tried my best today? And if we can say yes, guess what?
We're
So be
good.
it.
Yes, we're good. I love it. I love it. I wanted to maybe change slightly this conversation because in addition to soulful or soulless organizations that we belong in, our responsibility, there's also potentially the question of justice or injustice, right? And Joanna de Angelis, in another book, Jesus in Our Days, she mentioned to us, Leo, that this is, she's talking about Jesus. She's talking about the time that was very different, but not so much in terms of how the sense of justice was given or provided to all. But she says that realizing that people are different basically because their moral, their intellectual achievements are different, right? So maybe you and I, if we could compare our curriculum and go like, I have this, I have that, I have this, we should be the same. No, We bring a sum of experiences and achievements that precede going to school, that precedes a title in a resume or in your LinkedIn profile, right? It precedes all of this, and that where the maturity, the psychological maturity is really seen in. And you were talking about the CRM as you're discussing this with your students, right? With the several students. And it brought to my mind that regardless of technical or not technical training in organizations, we often forget that the client, internal or external, is a person just like you.
Very
And
much
that,
so.
right? That person is probably going through a problem. She or he has a somebody in close proximity that is going through perhaps a breakup, a heartache, a disease, a terminal ailment,
Right.
becoming so elderly and frail and vulnerable. There's so many, even much more different aspects to that person that you don't see. It's behind the facade of that relationship, but we should never forget that he or she is just like you, and like you, a very complex being in a path to its own maturity. But anyways, back to Joanna. Joanna says, people differ. They bring different achievements. Their hierarchical level is a direct result of their personal acquisition. So, what I am today, even though for some, and I'm just joking here, I may be the pinnacle, right? The pinnacle of envy. I have reached the top of the mountain. I am there. And if it is with merit, if it's a result of all that I have accumulated from my moral, intellectual, personal achievement, it is okay. It's not privilege, right? And then she goes back to Jesus, and he said, we understand, on one hand, that we were all created equal, but Jesus could see the potentiality of the other, the all that you can still become, and he did not judge you. So in the conscious being, she really moves on, the some of the notions that Jungian psychology brings, Leo, where she talks about that notion of the luggage, like the baggage, not the luggage, the baggage that we bring in the concept of ancestral beings. So when she says the old paradigms and models about humans, human beings, were all replaced with the introduction of this concept. We are immortal beings, and we bring as such that ancestral memory. And so my history is no longer today, this year, this company, this family, but it really brings a historiography of every life that I've had before this life. And those those experiences really are the ones that equip me to develop a deeper self, a sense of self, right? So, from that perspective, I love to see how we should also, this is an invitation, even if you are not Christian, to bring about that Jesus idea of unbiased view of the other with all their potentiality, and
Very well.
accept, right? And accept the other. And that's how perhaps we can bring that notion of spirituality into the workplace and help and contribute and be the champion for that mental health, that well being, that sense of respect and welcome to all of us. But what are your thoughts? I know we have about 5 more minutes. So I just thought, are there any things that we can tell all of those who are here with us today to really bring home that idea of how can we transform the places of work?
It's interesting that you brought this analysis of looking at the others, right,
Hmm.
as a being just like ourselves. But it's hard to do that when we
Hmm.
don't even accept ourselves.
True,
Um,
true.
it, it,
Yeah.
until we can cross that bridge, we need to understand ourselves. We need to
Hmm.
understand that we are evolutionary beings.
Hmm.
That we are spirits reincarnating, and we bring with through these reincarnations all these different elements, the good, the bad that we have lived. So much that we see our fears, our challenges that we create within ourselves, right, and for others as well. And until the moment that we say, I forgive myself, I have my limitations, but I also have my, the good inside of me that can also bring different elements. I'll give you
Hmm.
a quick take here on this idea, an example that I learned years and years ago when I started, developing myself a little bit in terms of delegation, not to dump things on people, but to teach them on how to do some of the things that I saw that those individuals wanted to learn. They wanted to change, right? And it was amazing to find out that they created different ways, different approaches to
Hmm.
perhaps conduct that task. And I'm like, huh. And I usually joke with my team, and I thought I knew everything. Look at this. This is beautiful. And they laugh. We all laugh, right? But we don't. The truth of the matter is, you don't have the best way to accomplish a task. You will find yourself amazed that some other individuals, they will do it like much faster, much more efficient than you do, and you learn from them. And I think that is the beauty that it comes with, for example, the process of delegation that many of us hate doing it, right? Because we think that we do it best, right? But
Hmm.
people wants to learn, and when you start thinking that, wait a minute, I need to be a little bit more humble and allow other people to grow as well, right? Because I want that for me, right? So you start bringing this to the work environment, to the location that we are part of it, right? I see not only the organization, but looking at this environment. To finalize, what I would like to say is this: that we all go through one thing that sometimes we just don't know that it happens, but it happens to all of us, is the work culture and subculture. Culture is this, let's say, organizational culture is this idea of that we have on how we perform in an organization, right? It
Hmm.
depends on several elements: the mission, the vision, the values of the company. It depends on the corporate values, that all of us, how we embrace them, the product, the company structure, the management styles that we find, right? The CEO, how they conduct, its business. But we also have the ability to work with this culture and create this subculture, if I will, if I
Hmm.
can say that way, to be the best servant, to be
Hmm.
the best individual who will say, look, we're going for this product, we're going for this goal. Yes, so let me do my part. Let me be more humane with those around me so that
Hmm.
everything else flows. Yes,
Hmm.
we can question here on this or that, how we're going to do it. But if we were to do our part, if I'm doing my part and you, Marcia, you're doing your part in the organization, guess what? We'll live a better environment, right? Bringing these teachings, these psychological concepts that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, what Jesus mentions to us as well, to be one of good-hearted spirit, right? And allow others to grow as well, seeing ourselves or wanting others to be just as we want ourselves to be as well, to be respected, to be loved as our brothers and sisters. So I'll leave you with that. Hopefully, this will be a good takeaway for all of us when we go to work tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I welcome everybody to take to heart the notions next time you go to work, right? Be it on next Monday or next whatever shift that you have. And I even propose something else, Leo. I think you talked about the idea of a mission and a vision, right? We often in business language we talk about value creation, and it goes quite well with the value creation from a spiritual perspective. What value from a humanity progressing into our angelitude really means from a creation of value. And I got another one for us, for you and me, Leo. We can talk next time and see if we're doing well. Let's look at the key performance indicator or KPI, where we measure the real justice of this new world that you talk about as we transition into a better world, a world of regeneration, where we no longer have a role in the competition where the strong destroys the weak. But now you shift that into, if you are the stronger, your responsibility, your accountability in that race is to actually bring that weaker up. It is your responsibility and my responsibility. So that's our KPIs. Next time we talk, Leo, I'm going to ask you, how did it go? How are you delegating so that those have that do not have had experience now bring additional experience in their resumes and can grow in their own career paths as well. But with that, my dear friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in today's conversation. And I look forward to talking to you next episode. Thank you.